It's the Real News Network, and I'm Greg Wilpert coming to you from Baltimore. Last Saturday, President Trump told reporters that the United States will withdraw from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, or INF, Treaty. Here's what Trump told reporters after a rally he held in Nevada.
And we've honored the agreement, but Russia has not, unfortunately, honored the agreement. So we're going to terminate the agreement. We're going to pull out.
The INF Treaty was signed by then-President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987. It required both countries to eliminate short-range and intermediate-range nuclear and conventional missiles. The Trump administration has long argued that the Russians are in violation of the INF Treaty when they deployed a new cruise missile system early last year. Governments around the world are reacting with dismay about the decision. Mikhail Gorbachev called the decision reckless and not the work of a great mind. Joining me now to discuss the INF Treaty is Lawrence Wilkerson. He is a retired U.S. colonel and former chief of staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. He is now a distinguished professor at the College of William and Mary. Thanks for joining us again, Larry.
Thanks for having me on.
So the INF Treaty is not that well known by the general public, but it is a significant treaty because it led to the removal of thousands of intermediate-range nuclear missiles from Europe in the late 1980s. So let's get our viewers and listeners up to speed. What was the INF Treaty about, and why did Reagan and Gorbachev sign it in 1987?
I think the real significance of this treaty, as Colin Powell used to say to me quite frequently, remember he was the Deputy National Security Advisor and then National Security Advisor for Ronald Reagan in his last couple of 3 years, is that it was the first elimination of an entire class of nuclear weapons. And in this case, of course, the delivery means. It was significant in that sense that it started a really genuine arms control, nuclear arms control process that then moved on to, for example, come to the Moscow Treaty in 2002, as I recall, when Secretary Powell was then the chief diplomat, if you will, that brought our stockpiles, Russia and ours, the Soviet Union and ours, down from in the neighborhoods of the 30,000 plus to in the neighborhoods of 2,000 plus. So it was a significant start in nuclear arms control. It was a sign to the world that the two superpowers were serious about limiting nuclear weapons. They were serious, at least in part, about their commitment to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And it was a huge step in what was theretofore a very dangerous process of essentially a nuclear arms race, and each side trying to build more and better than the other.
Now, the Trump administration has argued ever since last year that Russia is in the violation of the INF Treaty and that they tried to resolve the matter before deciding to break it. What's your take on this? Did Russia violate the treaty with a new cruise missile system?
Well, this is a complex question to answer, and I'm not sure I have the answers. I have my intuition and my suspicions and even some facts. The first would be the complexion of this withdrawal, which I think is a fact. It's very bad. And I mean that because let's look at what we've done to this point. We have withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord. We've withdrawn from, violated the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Agreement between us, the other members of the permanent members of the Security Council, Germany and Iran. And now we're withdrawing from, as I just indicated, one of the signature achievements of nuclear arms control. So the complexion is bad. I would not have done it simply for that reason alone until I'd done a lot more deliberation and a lot more talking with Moscow. And let's look at the other dimensions of it. First of all, we know from Russian exercises since about 2013 forward that one of their new doctrinal statements is that because of their perceived notion of our having a marked advantage in precision-guided munitions, and that's NATO plus the United States, of course, having that advantage, that they're going to use small-yield nuclear weapons to blunt any NATO penetration into their territory. So that in and of itself is a statement that they're going to need nuclear weapons that are fit for that particular role. And it's also a statement, by the way, that they don't consider, it seems to be anyway, they don't consider that as escalatory. Well, that's nonsense. Of course, it is escalatory. Any use of nuclear weapons, I would submit, would be escalatory. But that sort of gives them the motivation to be developing weapons in the neighborhood of what we've talked about, what the U.S. has talked about. They are developing these intermediate range nuclear weapons. But if you explore why they have done that and you explore U.S. policy with respect to Russia, you can have some empathy for why they're stating the doctrine and why they want to develop the weapons. Now, let me hasten to say I have no idea, nor have I talked to any intelligence personnel who have an idea. I'm sure there are some top secret code words inside the government as to exactly what the hardware is that the Russians are developing. It could well be a violation of the INF Treaty. But as I said before, this is not the way to deal with this. We need to sit down and we need to talk, and we need to try to preserve these things that we've created, treaties, to curb nuclear weapons in the world, rather than starting another nuclear arms race. So I'm very saddened to see what Trump is doing here. It's just another indication that this administration is withdrawing from the world, or at least withdrawing from those aspects of the world that blood and treasure has been spent by Americans since 1945 to build and maintain. So it's very disturbing in that light, in addition to being disturbing in the light of a new nuclear arms.
Now, if this matter still could have been resolved through negotiations, why tear up the treaty? There's speculation that the Trump administration wants to abandon it because doing so would allow the U.S. to deploy intermediate-range nuclear missiles towards China, directed towards China. What do you make of that argument, or are there other reasons?
I have a very a broad and deep intuition with regard to these sorts of things, and I'd say there are a number of reasons. In addition to, let's just posit for a moment, hypothetically, the Russians are getting ready to or have violated the treaty. I still would advocate going into talks, consultations, and reestablishing some trust and trying to get back on the nuclear arms control track. But let's just say that's true. I would say there are a number of factors in the United States that are militating for this development. One is the nuclear complex, which sees itself becoming increasingly non-utilitarian in regards to the U.S. military-industrial complex. Lots of jobs going away, lots of money going away. States like New Mexico and Washington that have a huge investment in the nuclear industry, all essentially advocating, lobbying for new and better nuclear weapons. Secondly, I can see the U.S. Air Force in particular, but the U.S. military in general, lobbying for newer and better weapons. And we do this under the guise of spending $1 trillion or so of taxpayer money when we're $21 trillion in debt on surety and security and modernization of our nuclear weapons complex. While some of that is necessary to make sure the weapons will work, to make sure they're safe, to make sure they're modern and so forth, most of it is not necessary. So we're going to spend all this money. And basically, this is the military-industrial complex going after this, accompanied by the Air Force and other services who want new and brighter and shinier things, like the new air-launched cruise missile off the new, we don't even know how much it costs, Air Force bomber, because it's going to cost more than the F-35 even. So you've got all of these things that are influencing these decisions. It's like Trump's decision with regard to the recent, probably, I think, murder and dismemberment, even possibly, of Khashoggi, the journalist, with, I've got $100 billion worth of arms the Saudis are going to buy, so what's one murder? It's the same principle. It's operating from the same principle. We've got arms to make, we've got arms to sell, we've got money to make, jobs to keep, profits to make, so let's keep making these weapons. Who cares if they might someday in the future blow up the world?
And so what do you see as being the longer-term consequences of abandoning the INF Treaty? There has been speculation that the U.S. might also abandon the 2010 New START Treaty, which Obama and President Medvedev signed at the time. Will the INF abandonment pave the way for dismissing other treaties, and what would that mean for U.S. and global security?
I'm sad to say this, but yes, it does, in fact, pave the way. I know personally that National Security Advisor John Bolton doesn't like any inhibitions whatsoever on, quote, U.S. sovereignty, unquote. And he sees almost every treaty, particularly arms control treaties, as being such an intrusion on U.S. sovereignty. So this is a group that is predisposed to do this sort of thing, get rid of international treaties, get rid of the United Nations organization. John Bolton once said, if you knock the top, I think, 10 stories off the UN, it'd probably be just as effective, if not just as ineffective. So these are not people who are in love with international organizations, with treaties in general, with arms control in general. What they're in love with is being so fearful, so huge and powerful that the rest of the world trembles in your presence. And that's what gives them a feeling of security. Me and most of the people I know who are sane and sober, that gives them some real concern. Concerns about the future of the globe, concerns about the future of state relations, concerned about the future of Moscow, Washington, and Beijing, Washington relations. Look at what we're getting ready to do, possibly in Northeast Asia, with North Korea being a declared nuclear weapon power. Probably not, I'd say 99.9% sure, not going to ever give up those weapons, but go into some latent capability possible they will with this new set of negotiations. Then we've got Prime Minister Abe in Japan looking at being a nuclear state. Then we've got China, because Japan makes this decision probably in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner, to go nuclear, become a nuclear weapon state. Then we've got China looking at revising what was Mao's philosophy about nuclear weapons and building far more nuclear weapons than they currently have. So we've got a nuclear arms race in Northeast Asia. I'm not one of those. There are some around Trump who are one of those who believe that more nuclear weapons would stabilize the world rather than make it a more dangerous place. I think more nuclear weapons, I think nuclear weapons, period, make the world an incredibly dangerous place.
Not very encouraging thought, but we're going to have to leave it there. I was speaking to Larry Wilkerson, Distinguished Professor at the College of William and Mary. Thanks again, Larry, for having joined us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.